Do we have any fans of leadership or leadership development in the room? Okay. All right. So how many people in this room believe there's a leadership problem in this country? And I'm not talking political leadership. I'm really talking about business leadership, okay? All right, so we have a few. Let's take it down a notch. How many people believe there's a leadership problem in your company? Okay. We've got a few honest folks in here. That's great. Let's take it down one more notch. How many people believe there's a leadership problem in this room? Show of hands. All right. Hey, there's one over here. All right. Well, again, I'm a very passionate person when it comes to leadership development. I've spent the last 30 years practicing and learning, and I've learned from some of the best people like Warren Bennis, people like Ken Blanchard. So it's very important for me when it comes to looking at leadership and leadership development. How many people believe that leadership is really important when it comes to achieving results? Okay, good. Well, again, Warren Bennis would tell us that's number one. And Warren has really spent the past 6 decades studying leadership, and he still studies it today. He's still teaching today down at USC at the Marshall School of Business as part of their MBA program. One more question. How many people believe they have change management figured out? Behave yourself down here in front, will you? All right. That's good to hear. Well, what I tried to do a few years ago is write a book, The Collaborator, that attempts to help people understand change and change management. And it's my attempt to really lay out a platform, if you will, to address that issue. And so what we're going to do for the balance of our conversation this afternoon is really talk about that platform, that operating platform, as described in the book called The Collaborator. Let me share some new news with you. This comes from IBM's Global C-Suite study. They do this every year. This is 2013. These are a couple of key takeaways I wanted to share with this group today. Number one, CEOs consider technology the single most important force shaping the organization, their organization. When I wrote the book in 2007, technology was number 3 out of 9 factors that they were rating in this survey. Today, it's number 1. Number 2, 63% of CEOs pursuing growth through innovation using collaboration not only internally but also externally with partners and suppliers. So it's all this new technology, social media, et cetera, that they're banking on to help drive collaboration. And in the study, they talked about the fact that the average number of gadgets that we have today is something like 4. And by the year 2025, it's going to be like 7, if you can believe that. So all those gadgets are hopefully going to contribute to one's ability to collaborate. Number 3, outperforming companies are 54% more likely than underperforming companies to collaborate extensively with their customers. Okay, so there's an ROI for you. And then fourth, the bullet here where it says encouragement is not enough, that was in the study. The CEOs acknowledge the fact that wishing for collaboration all by itself is not really going to make it. It's not going to cut it. So there's really a need to put in place some infrastructure to support collaboration. And if I was sitting in your shoes at your point in your career, I'd be looking at this saying, oh boy, this is an opportunity to make a contribution at my organization, right? Because it's a role that HR needs to embrace, I believe, in terms of helping CEOs match up with this particular challenge. And it's a big challenge. Act 3. This comes from Gary Hamel. Gary Hamel, if you're into strategy, is one of the stars. He's one of the rock stars, the superstars on the strategic front. He teaches out of the University of London, and Gary's been banging this drum for a number of years as far as trying to get organizations to believe that they have to find a new platform for managing change. That's a segue for us to talk about soccer. And soccer, as you can see from this particular slide, has been described over the years as a beautiful game. It's a very simple game, only has 16 rules or so. And we're going to give you a chance to see what soccer looks like if you're not familiar with the game in a few minutes. If I was writing a term paper for Alan, this would be my thesis. All right? This is really what I see going on in business. I could see it in 2006, 2007 when I wrote the book. It hasn't changed. In fact, as we just mentioned, technology is becoming a bigger factor in organizations in terms of empowering people and organizations to collaborate in order to achieve innovation for business growth purposes. And so the Collaborator is a story that we're not really going to get into. If you want to read the story, obviously you got to buy the book. But it's an easy read. I think it's described as an airplane read. So if you went from here to LA, I'll bet you $5 you can read it one way. It's pretty short. So what we're going to go through this afternoon is really, I'm going to give you the infrastructure behind the book, and that way you can understand what makes up the game of soccer and how those embedded characteristics in soccer translate to the global business world, the global business model that we've talked about, okay? So in the book, you've got operating principles, you've got competencies, and you've got leader attributes and behaviors. Those are the three components. Together, I describe those three components as the collaboration code. All right? They all have to be in play, working together for the code to produce results. For those of you who are visual learners like myself, this is what it looks like, with the collaboration code described again as operating principles, competencies, leader attributes. We're going to spend most of the next few minutes on operating principles. We'll talk a little bit about competencies, and I'm hardly going to say a word about leader attributes at this point. So operating principles in the book are described as the framework. There's 11 operating principles. There's the list of the principles. We're going to go through these very quickly. I'm going to have to move very quickly. We're going to look at the video again and give you a chance to see what you can see in the video relative to these 11. It's important to understand, as this lady out here mentioned earlier, these things are all in play at the same time. All right? There's no ranking. Do 1, do 2, do 3, do 4, do 5, et cetera, et cetera. They're all in play. There's a flow, and they all have to be in play. It's the same with the game of soccer. If 11 players aren't on the field, then the synergies that you're looking for on the soccer field or in the business world are not going to be there. All right? So think of the word flow here. It's a dynamic situation. Understand that everybody can play. There's a story here that I like to share. I call it the Pele story. Pele was at one time the world's greatest soccer player from Brazil. I had a chance to meet him in 1976 up in Seattle. And he didn't speak any English. I'm not sure if he speaks English today, but it wasn't like we had a conversation, because we didn't. The big takeaway was the fact that he was only about 5'5". And I'm 5'9" on a good day, right? And I just couldn't believe my eyes when I met the guy and shook his hand. Because here's the #1 player in the world. think he won like 3 World Cups for Brazil. And he's a little guy. So that really convinced me that in soccer, anybody can play. And as you can see from the screen here, it's the same thing in business with the influence of technology. Technology has leveled the playing field in a very similar way. Rely on each other is, again, a principle that's intended to reinforce the interdependent nature of the team experience. Most of us have grown up with silo management. Maybe it's still out there. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, right? Well, that's not going to cut it in terms of the collaboration that's needed in the future. Number 9, I think, is probably going to be another big hurdle for all of us to deal with. And again, from an HR perspective, if you're into training and development, this might be a big one for you. It's been my experience that many managers don't know how to effectively delegate. And I mean, I can go back 30 years, I can go back 20 years, I can go back 10 years. It hasn't changed very much in the 3 organizations that I worked in. And we worked hard at training and development. We used Ken Blanchard's situational leadership and some other techniques to help teach people how to manage. But it's tough because people don't, it's like, I don't want to, trust you with getting the job done, right? So I'm not going to delegate. Maybe I can do it better myself than you can do it, Tim. Probably. But except when it comes to being in the MC, you're a great MC. So, this is probably hurdle number 2, right? My thinking. How do we teach managers to effectively delegate? I think it gets back to this SHINE stuff that we talked about as far as underlying assumptions. What assumptions do you bring to the table, Mr. Manager, around people? Are they positive? Are they negative? If they're positive, then you're probably going to be in good shape as far as being able to trust people to get the job done. If they're negative, watch out. Number 10, develop partners on the field. This is the playoff of Toyota, in the Toyota way. And they look at every opportunity as a development opportunity. If you've read any of their literature, their books, and this is what we're really talking about with soccer, because all 11 of those folks on the soccer field are leaders. They have to be leaders in order to get the job done, right? Because nobody's going to do it for them. They don't have the ability to call a timeout, to stop the play, etc. They have to get the job done on their own. Gary Hamel, who we talked about earlier, he's saying, as well as, we've got to find a new operating platform, he's saying, we need to syndicate leadership. Well, this is what he's talking about. Syndicating leadership. It's making everybody in this room a leader. Number 11 deals with relationships primarily. You saw in that one model where I had the visual of the model with relationships as a bridge. Well, this is the connection we want to make here with relationships, especially in the context of global business, because again, relationships are really key in global business. They're probably really key in this room, but probably more so in the context of global business. And Richard Farson, who's written a couple of books, he's one of my mentors as well, would tell you that you can't technique people to death because they won't let you get away with it. But I can tell you that if the relationship is in place, if I've got a relationship with Rick here and it's built on trust, etc., and it's been around, we've known each other for a while, he's going to let me technique him a little bit, right? Whatever that technique may look like. But if there's no relationship there, he's going to see through that so quickly, he's going to blow me off, I'm guessing, in terms of whether or not I can use that technique and whether or not that technique even has any impact on influencing Rick. So relationships first, technique second. In wrapping up, we've talked about the business playing field, rendering traditional leadership models as obsolete. We talked about leaders and employees are going to need to focus on collaboration to stay competitive in the global business game, again, with technology sort of being the big driver there. And then the third thing, obviously, as we've talked about soccer's viability as an operating platform.